and welcome back to the Features of the Night podcast. I am one of three hosts, VampireKitten. We have Mickle Mackle, and we have 7 Minutes in Devon, also known as Johnny. Hello. Welcome to the Features of the Night podcast. Today we are talking about low-budget horror films. And we're talking the lowest budget, like, of all time.
Like, no budget.
Like, no budget. No low, no budget.
Glow.
I guess our rules for this podcast were 1,500 was our max. Because
15,000.
Oh, 15, sorry. 15,000 was our max. And that is the high end of Paranormal Activity. We wanted to talk about that. But the lowest one we could possibly find was Ouija Shark. I'm sure there are probably lower. But
I want to emphasize something too before we get started. This is not a definitive list. This is just stuff that we have found recently.
Mm-hmm.
So the scale, our cap is somewhat arbitrary at 15K, but we thought, we would do something that is mainstream low budget and work our way backward. There are definitely films at lower budgets. We are not here to say these are all of them by any means.
Right. We'll start on the lower end. You guys introduced me to Ouija Shark.
Yes, we did. Johnny, do you want to
Pretty sure that budget was spent on video cameras.
Maybe, or getting the bands. Don't forget that it stars Goat, the band.
I didn't even realize that.
It does.
Yeah, well, they just keep on throwing that out there. I don't know anything about the band other than they are like the soundtrack.
Yeah, that's probably where the whole budget went.
Someone want to synopsize Ouija Shark? Ouija Shark. Someone want to synopsize it? I don't understand people's, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. I don't understand people's obsession with sharks. Like, sharks are fucking rad. But are they, cool enough to have, I don't know. They just don't seem like horror movie stuff to me.
I guess my question here is, how do you make a shark movie that is completely different from every other shark movie? Because people are like, oh, well, the Meg. It's like, well, it's just a big shark.
Meg was
it's a larger shark. I'm not saying it was a bad movie,
Meg.
But how different is that from other shark movies of a similar premise?
Yeah, they're all
I think when we get past Jaws, which really set the standard, how do you make something about a shark without it just being, capitalizing on Jaws? And that's where we get Ouija Shark, because it's a ghost shark.
You can only give sharks so many things, but as a side note, my favorite shark movie of all time is Deep Blue Sea, and I stand on that hill, and I will die on that hill because I think that movie is fantastic.
I do like that movie, especially when the shark leaps out of the water and grabs Samuel L. Jackson, because I was not expecting that the first time I saw that.
Was it Sam Jackson? No, Sam Jackson.
It was.
It was Samuel L. Jackson. Yes, it was.
Oh, that movie. I just love LL Cool J in that movie.
Yeah, he's in it too.
But yeah, okay. So, what's the synopsis for Ouija Shark?
Okay, so basically, a group of girls, they're at the beach, just hanging out, and this Ouija board floats up on the shore, and it's not like your typical Ouija board. It's like a piece of wood with
Wait, can you
driftwood.
describe what it looks like?
Yeah, it's a piece of driftwood.
It's like a Halloween decoration.
It's really bad.
That you would hang on your door.
Like a foam one.
So basically they, it washes up on the beach and they summon a spirit ghost of a shark. And they have to get this occult specialist to rid the shark ghost. And it gets really uncanny at some points, but the shark that you see throughout the film is superimposed on the screen to look like a ghost. But sometimes when it's moving its mouth, it's one of those little hand puppets that you would get from the dollar store of the shark, the ones that are made of that cheap rubber hand puppets.
The budget definitely went to props.
Oh, for sure. And maybe some of the editing. I don't know if the actors were paid. Probably not.
I'm gonna say no. They were
paid I'm looking at the cover.
Exposure.
Oh my god. I'm looking at the cover and it is very misleading. It is photoshopped in such a way that the shark looks intimidating, And the person holding the Ouija board is holding like an actual Ouija board and not the bullshit that they have in the movie.
Do you remember when we used to go to like the video store and we would pick movies based off of what they looked like? I would have fallen for this cover so fucking fast.
So I actually have it's not really a funny story about that, but there are two. I remember going to Blockbuster as a kid, and there were three video covers that always stood out for me. Silence of the Lambs, because I loved the moth over the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
The movie April Fool's Day from the 80s, because the girl's braid was like a noose.
Oh, yeah.
And Dead Alive by Peter Jackson, because
that cover's wild looking, though.
I love that cover.
That cover's crazy. So Ouija Shark was made for approximately $211 USD. It was made.
Yeah.
It was a Canadian.
300 Canadian. Yeah, $300 Canadian, roughly $211 US.
So we kind of there's obviously some other movies in between this one and the next few of movies we're gonna discuss, but like we kind of picked and chose based off of like campy, quality, fun, and so like the next one we wanted to kind of talk about was Creep.
God, I love the original Creep. Actually, I don't know how people feel about it. Creep 2 is actually my favorite.
And that one was also made for roughly the same amount as the first one.
I'm looking up the Creep film budgets. Because didn't 3 come out? Or no, we never got 3, we got the Creep
We never got
tapes.
3, we got the Creep tapes, which honestly, not my favorite.
I honestly hate them.
I'm sorry, I feel bad, but whatever.
Creep really grew on me. Because the first one I saw, I was just like, what the fuck did I watch? And then I saw the second one and I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I understand. I think the second one's better than the first one. But then the Creep tapes came out, and I'm like, oh man, I feel like we're trying to shove a lot of content into a single episode, and I feel like they could have. There was one episode that was stand out to me, where I think it was the girl. Was it a girl who kind of kept pushing his boundaries?
Yes.
Right. That was the only episode that I kind of really enjoyed, and I could have seen 3 being a whole movie based off of that one episode.
I really wish they would have just done Creep 3 instead of the Creep tapes.
Yeah. That guy is super weird, by the way.
Oh, definitely.
And I know, didn't he write and direct and act and do like pretty much
everything?
Yeah,
in the film? He basically did everything.
That's wild.
I do think that Jason Blum helped produce, but don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure.
So the Creep budget was $500. Creep 2, what was the budget for Creep 2? We know.
I think it's roughly the same, maybe a little more.
I'm curious to know what the budgets was for the Creep tapes.
Take it with a grain of salt because this is Google. Google says more than 500K.
500K?
Wait, this can't be right. What year did... Yeah, I'm getting multiple numbers.
No.
It's still listed as low budget. I'm not completely certain on the price of this. I can't get a definitive cost anywhere, which is interesting, but...
No, the Creep tapes were renewed for season 2.
Oh, God. Hold on, I think I have... Where's this link? Okay, yeah, no, that makes no sense because there's 2 different numbers I'm getting.
I hate AI.
Yeah, me too. Well, the reason it's getting 2 is there's a different film called The Creep 2 that's coming out this year.
Oh.
With a budget of 45K. Creep 2, hold on, let me see if I can get this. I am not getting budget, and that's the problem.
No worries. Like I said, we can also cut all of this out, so...
Creep 2's budget was over $500. Which is all the information they can get.
Shudder, they were probably more money. Maybe that's why they sucked. It's because they weren't made out of... I feel like they weren't made out of as much passion as the first 2 movies, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because just go back to basics.
Yeah.
You know,
Do what works.
I mean,
so
that's how the first Paranormal Activity was made. It was very, very basic.
the guy's name is Mark
Duplass.
And most of the things that he has made are creep movies. Oh, he also did The One I Love and Safety Not Guaranteed. Oh, he has a little bit of a IMDb. I feel like he seems like he was really focused on creep.
He was, and part of the reason that the creep tapes took so long to release was because he kept on revising the script, from what I understand, and then settled on the format of individual episodes rather than, which I think is to the detriment of the both budgeting and plot.
Right.
Yeah, he should have just made a third one, like a third film, instead of just a series.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was weird. I think that there are movies that try to be like Creep, but they're not. They don't quite have that same. I honestly think it's the Mark guy who brings the most to that series. Like, he's got this weird literal creepiness about him in these movies that I don't think that people can replicate. He's just very uncomfortable to watch. And I think that's what is, I'm serious. Like, I think
know.
that's what makes those movies, like, if it were any other actor, it would have to be somebody that's uncomfortable to watch. Like, you feel awkward watching it. That's such a hard thing to do, right? You have these movies where you're like, oh, you need to be creepy, you need to be weird, you need to be gross, you need to be uncomfortable. But then they don't quite get there. This guy gets there every single time.
I think about it too in terms of fiction, and that's not surprising given my background in literature, but watching Creep, his kind of entitled character reminds me very much of other characters who feel they have like a privileged perspective. And the one that comes to mind specifically is Jonan Vasquez's Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. The one, because he's very much like, I'm looking for somebody who understands me, and every time somebody even comes close to that, he kills them because he has this grand perspective of the world around him. And ultimately, he's a brat. Like, I love Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. I think Jonan Vasquez is incredible in his art and narrative telling. But when it comes down to it, Johnny doesn't have a privileged view of the world. He just is, I mean, he's the homicidal maniac. It's a delusion of grandeur in some case.
I love those comics. It's been a while since I've read them, but I do love them. See, for me though, the character he portrays in Creeps gives me like Annie Wilkes vibes from Misery meets like Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction. I don't know if y'all have seen Fatal Attraction, or you've probably seen some parody of it, but like if those two people met, that's the vibe he gives me off with his character in Creep.
I could see that.
Kind of obsessive with this person that he's having film him for like his quote unquote like unborn child to see and watch these tapes.
Well, I think too what makes this unsettling, and this is where I think low budget really feeds into it. A lot of analog horror and analog media by its very nature is kind of self-destructive, and I cite like VHS tapes. If you pause a VHS tape repeatedly, it breaks down and you can see kind of blips in that area. Or if it deteriorates over time, it inherently becomes more horrific. And maybe that's an opinion, but I do know that a lot of analog horror relies on that trope of that VHS style that a lot of films fail to replicate. I can't think of a specific film off the top of my head right this second that uses a granular kind of style, but a lot of them use a filter rather than trying to recreate the graininess. So it looks like you have a filter over a very refined image rather than an authentic image. But I think in this case, what lends to the creepiness is the person behind the camera is always a voyeur. Whether it is Mark Duplass's character or the person who's filming him, there's always that sense of being watched, whether it is the murderer or the victim.
I mean, I feel that. I think at some point we're going to do a found footage episode, and I think that's important to talk about what you were talking about with the granular style of VHS, the analog is, I think it's what it's typically called. They don't really do that anymore, and I've very few films I have seen recently do that. Like, The only one I've actually seen recently that kind of has it down is the VHS tapes. I mean, like I said, it's another conversation for another time, but I feel like they are closer to it than most other films.
Yes.
Which now that I think about it, I feel like the VHS tapes were probably not a pretty high budget either.
Oh, let's see what the first one.
I don't think they were, but I mean, they wouldn't fit in with this because I think they were definitely higher than.
Yeah, they're a little bit higher. They're still pretty low budget when we consider it, because I'm looking at the 2012 film. It's $242,000 estimate.
Yeah, that's still a little high for
actually.
We were...
Yeah.
Well, so
the 2024 had an estimated budget of $600K, so it's a little bit higher. It's still we're looking at ultra low budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's surprisingly low for what I thought it was. I wonder what
Are we going to be getting another one?
I don't know. I liked the last one.
I liked the last one.
So let's talk about since we were talking about ultra low budget, let's talk about let's talk about campy low budget.
Yes.
On to our
my favorite.
Few.
So go ahead.
Inhuman Witch.
Inhuman Witch. Okay. So to give you a sense of this movie plot, and spoiler alert, this was made by a group of people who clearly have a passion for film but no talent for it, and they know they have no talent for it. I'm sorry to everybody in that film, but you cannot act.
We love you. Thank you.
We love you, though, because you did this. And I think there is something beautiful in what you made. And there is a saying that is very popular in the art world right now and has been popular for a long time, and it is make bad art. And this is what I think Inhuman Witch is. It is bad art, but it is still art.
I mean, there's definitely someone out there who will think bad art is good art and will enjoy this film, like we did. I enjoyed this film for what it was.
I had a blast watching this one.
It's a fun watch.
It's so stupid.
It's so stupid. It's terrible.
But like the fact that they tried really hard to make it was obviously a satire on old horror films. And I kind of that's what's charming about it. But like why a big sloppy Joe?
Because it's ridiculous. It like parodies like those
like the stuff
1950s like sci-fi from outer space monster movies.
Well, I'm going to point out
Not
something.
Saying he was from outer space because he was on a ship for like the U.S. government or whatever, so he was like in space, but then fell to Earth as a mutated blob of ground beef.
I will point out that his name is also Joe.
His name is Joe.
I forgot about that.
It's
Can we
so
talk
silly.
about our
love
brave hero that it took the whole movie to get to? I know this is spoiler alert. You guys are just gonna
the person who ate it.
On this entire
we're spoiling you today. You're such spoiled little beans. We love you.
We love all of you.
Our hero was a competitive eater. And he was wonderful. I loved him. And I feel like he was prepared to save the world, though. Like, fully prepared.
I loved the man's wife. As bad and poorly acted that she was, there was that scene where the dog was killed by the ground beef. And she's going on and on about how, oh, that poor dog. And the guy mentions, like, and the people he killed. And she's like, but the dog. Like, she didn't give a fuck about the people. She's just, like, concerned about the dog. And I feel like that's how I vibe. Because I don't care how many people die in scary movies, but do not harm the animal.
Right.
Her bad acting, though, was what really made it. And, you know,
so
again,
bad.
Wow, shocker. I'm going to go into literary theory. I'm pulling from Susan Sontag's notes on camp, which if you haven't read, you better. It is such a good definition. It's not a singular definition, but it's a great list of what camp is. I'll give just a little bit from, I guess, Tenet 54. I would call it Rule 54, but that sounds too much like Rule 34.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Yeah. The experiences of camp. The experiences of... Oh my God. We don't. The experiences of camp are based on the great discovery that the sensibility of high culture has no monopoly upon refinement. Camp asserts that good taste is not simply good taste, that there exists indeed a good taste of bad taste. The discovery of the good taste of bad taste can be very liberating. And Susan Sontag goes on to discuss specific examples and other discussions of camp. I'm literally pulling a small section, just a tiny little small section, that emphasizes good taste of bad taste. Because what we're talking about here, I think, is a good example of good taste of bad taste. These people were very self-aware that they had a limited budget, knew they had very limited experience, and still made because they thought it was fun. And I think this parallels some other things we'll talk about today, like Peter Jackson's Bad Taste, which, what a great title for what we're talking about.
Honestly, his greatest film. I will die on that hill.
When people think about Peter Jackson, they clearly think about Bad Taste, not his, less famous film series, Lord of the Rings. Don't come at me. I'm being ironic here, y'all. But going back to Inhuman Witch, I think what's charming is, for example, the wife's bad acting. It's so bad, but it's clear that she's not an actor. Like, that's not what she does. And putting her in this film.
What if it is what she does?
I'm so sorry if it is. I'm gonna look it up real quick.
But I feel like
at the same time, her acting was so bad, but it was very, like, it was funny. Like, it was so bad, like, you had to laugh. It was comical.
Oh God, she's in so many movies. She's in Inhuman Witch. Yeah, that's it.
I will say that
is this
for the budget that movie had, I think they did a lot. They got a lot done, for $2,000.
Oh, right. We didn't even talk about that. It was made for $2,000. And it was a wild ride. Honestly.
But it's fun. I will say it's not everybody's cup of tea. But if you like those really bad sci-fi channel movies, you'll probably enjoy Inhuman Witch.
Yeah. It is a great movie. It's it's just ridiculous. And they filmed in Ohio. That was their main filming area.
We love a Sloppy Joe space monster.
Sloppy Joe Ohio.
Sloppy Joe Ohio.
Perfect. End of episode. We did it.
We did it.
We peaked with Sloppy Joe Ohio.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the next one. Speaking of campy horror, I also want to actually look up a couple more. But let's talk about Llamageddon, which for some reason my bone to pick with Llamageddon right now is, why was it pulled from every streaming media service?
I think this is something.
Honestly, because I feel like I just saw it on like Amazon Prime like 3 weeks ago that it was there, or on Tubi or somewhere. I swear I've seen it somewhere streaming. Like, where did it go? It's just gone.
I can't definitively say, but one speculation that I think could be the case is, they did make the movie under false premise. Because they got money for a scholarship to make this film.
Yeah, it was made with grant money, and then they made a film that was completely different than a film that they said they were going to make.
And this is per an interview we saw with the director of the film. Keep in mind, too, that this film is so bad that virtually everybody in the credits took a different name.
Also, I'm pretty sure most of the $3,000 budget for Llamageddon went towards the animation sequences. Because that animation was really good, to be honest. Best part of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, weirdly, I mean, the animation is incredible. Like, it's not the best animation I have ever seen. It's choppy, but it fits what it's trying to do. And then,
compared to the rest of the film, the animation is fantastic.
So, oh my gosh. I was looking up some other crappy horror films, right, while we were sitting here. Velocipaster has a bigger budget than Paranormal Activity.
I still haven't seen that.
It's crazy. You should watch it. I'm trying to think if there are any others that are like crazy. I'm sure there's probably more, but more research will have to be done. We're just kind of touching on a little bit here and there. Also, the Human Witch cover is nothing like the monster in the movie.
I know.
I was watching the movie and I was like, where's the monster? And then we got like Meatwad and I'm like, oh, fuck, I guess we're not going to get the cover monster.
Oh my god, he literally does look like Meatwad.
He looks like Meatwad.
That's
What's up,
exactly what it
guys?
is. It's Meatwad.
What's up, guys? I'm on the phone Witch.
Oh my god. So good. It's a spin-off episode of The Brood Witch.
Oh my god.
As a brief aside, I've done academic work with that episode, but I digress.
But yeah, I'm looking up some of these other sci-fi movies. Some of them were made for more than, or these other, crappy ones that are made. They're like inanimate objects made into other things.
Well, this is something that I love about film and film media. And you know that I'm currently teaching work on surrealism and Dada, early 20th century avant-garde movements. And they made films that were very clearly low budget. And we're not going to go down the whole rabbit hole of Dada and surrealist film. But I bring this up because one of the things that I love with early film is how experimental it is, not just in the avant-garde, and how much they did with a limited budget. These are people who are taking cameras, which are already inherently costly and prohibitive in some aspect, but making things with stop motion, making things with pieces of paper, making things with ephemera, and really pushing the limits of what can be called film and what can be done with film media. And this is what I love about the low budget, because it really pushes people to consider what can we do to maximize what we have with the cost we're running at.
Yeah, I think it's important to also go, hey, let's just do this for fun. And I feel like some of the more funsy movies ended up being really, really, really good. That moves us into bad taste.
Yes.
Funsies movies. I also was looking at a list of like weird inanimate object movies like Killer Sofa and Rubber, and they are all very higher budget than Paranormal Activity, which is wild to me.
I love Rubber.
I do too. It's so fun.
I found out about that movie because my friend told me. He's like, it's this movie about a tire that makes people's heads explode. And I'm like, what do you mean a tire? Like a car tire? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, seriously? I need to see this because I love dumb shit like that.
So good. So Bad Taste is kind of what sort of spurred this episode. Because Bad Taste was made for $11,000. That's it. And Peter Jackson.
And it is Peter Jackson's very first film, long before Lord of the Rings.
Is it the first film?
It's his first film.
Wow.
And the entire movie was shot on a 16 millimeter Bolex camera.
I think it takes place on the same ground of Lord of the Rings.
No, I don't know.
Does that make
I think it was filmed. It was filmed in his hometown, like his hometown that he grew up in.
I didn't mean the literal places. I meant New Zealand.
Oh,
well, I mean, he grew up in a town in New Zealand. It was filmed in New Zealand, but it was filmed in his town. I think it was filmed in his where he grew up.
I was gonna say
in New Zealand.
Canon.
Yes. I my headcanon is that this is part of Lord of the Rings.
Okay. This movie is wild. Why are the aliens why they have some cake? They have such thick butts. Like
their asses are popping out of their pants, like literally tearing.
Yeah, can I get your workout routine? Because I would like to make my ass look like that if possible.
Apparently there was a 3D version, and I'm just like, yeah, you're gonna poke an eye out with that ass.
Wait.
Also, a little fun fact about the alien faces: the masks for the film were actually made and baked in Peter Jackson's mother's oven.
That's wild.
That's on the IMDb page, and it says in addition to that, his family was forced to have sausages for dinner. And I just love that little bit. Like, wow.
What?
It says as he frequently used her oven to harden the latex, his family was forced to have sausages for dinner. And I'm just like, that's a very weird.
Probably because the chemicals or whatever.
Use the oven for anything else. You're not supposed to if you're putting latex in it. That's hilarious.
That's really funny.
So what how did Bad Taste happen is my question. Like, how did we get from point A to point B to point Z? Because it's like what I did there. Like that? because it's New Zealand. Sorry.
Yes.
That was a shitty joke.
I see what you did there. I actually don't know how the film came to be, like what spawned this. I just know it's about like this group of aliens who are from this planet, and they like have a bunch of like fast food chains, and they have used up all their resources in terms of like food and supplies. So they come to planet Earth to harvest humans for their fast food.
So I just want to know what the logic behind A, the aliens are, but B, the makeup in that movie is really good for what it is and for when it was.
Yes.
Like, the special effects are crazy.
I want to point out too
There's
that
a lot of squelching sounds.
everything is incredibly gross in the movie too. And like I'm
it's
looking at
so
the
gross.
aliens and it's ugly as shit. But that's part of it. And I think this is something that's incredible and important about this film, that it is titled Bad Taste. And this is why I brought in Susan Sontag today, because this is an example of good taste of bad taste. Peter Jackson knew what he was doing. The film is deliberately awful in many ways. And that's not to say it's a bad film. Please don't mistake my point here. I think it's actually an incredible film. I think it pushes the limits of horror and sci-fi, and it relishes in how disgustingly bad it is.
Yeah.
There's a scene. Oh, go ahead.
And Peter Jackson is just like a wild man in it.
At one point, his skull cracks open.
Yeah.
And part of his brain, which is more than likely, it looked like it was probably some animal's testicle. Or latex.
It really did look like a testicle.
It was either viscera, like testicle viscera, or latex. I don't know what the special effects.
It could have been like just a chicken breast, honestly.
Like
whatever it was
to me.
It just looked meaty. Whatever it was, it looked meaty.
It did look meaty.
He opens the back of his skull, which like opens like one of those, what are they, the chocolate oranges you crack on a table?
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
It's like a slice like that, and he just puts the brain in and ties it up with his tie.
Yeah, he just ties his like belt around his head to hold his skull together. When realistically, like, bro, you'd be dead.
Right, and I think that's the thing that this acknowledges by calling itself Bad Taste. It's incredibly self-referential and self-aware, and that's why Bad Taste, in my opinion, is a good movie. Because also, Peter Jackson had the courage to make something deliberately bad, which is camp. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah. My favorite part in the movie is towards the end when, like, you know, they're trying to like launch themselves into space to escape, and he's in there and he gets eaten by one of the aliens, like just swallowed whole, but he has the chainsaw, so he basically like chainsaws his way through, and the alien basically like gives birth to him, and he's lying on the ground all covered in blood, and he looks directly at the camera and says, "I'm born again."
Definitely
it's just
self-aware.
Yes, and it's just so good. It's so bad, but it's so good.
Speaking of bad taste, and I just want to bring up something that I realized in looking at the IMDb pages and cast listings between Bad Taste and Llamageddon. And this is just a brief aside, but I think it's funny as hell. In Llamageddon, I mentioned that a lot of the people chose fake names because they didn't really want to be associated with it, perhaps didn't want to get in trouble with the fact that they were using scholarship or grant money. But the person who plays Trent chose the name Gooch Jesko III. Gooch. Gooch. Now, in Bad Taste, third-class aliens are played by Michael Gooch and Peter Gooch. And that's just a lot of Gooch between two movies.
Oh, that's a lot of Gooch.
I'm wondering if there's like a consistency thing that people do that in campy, crappy horror films. Like, if there's like a logical reason behind that, or if it's just, you know, poo-poo-pee-pee jokes. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I would like to like maybe look up a little bit more research to see if there's like reasoning behind that or not.
I would also like to add just another little fun fact about Bad Taste. So when Peter Jackson won the Academy Award for, I think it was Return of the King that won Best Picture that year, during his speech, he had mentioned that the movie Bad Taste, along with another film of his, Meet the Feebles, were wisely overlooked by the Academy. And honestly, I don't think anyone in that industry or high up in that industry has probably seen either of these movies.
I was about to say,
And if they have, good for you.
I feel like those are movies that he probably said those for his award thing, his award speech. And people were probably so confused. They were like, what movies?
I hope that people looked up those movies and went to watch them after he mentioned them.
Meet the Feebles is literal puppet porn.
Oh, I know. We would have talked about that one, but that is not a super low budget movie by any means.
Do yourself
Puppets are
a favor.
expensive, y'all.
Yeah. Puppets are so expensive. Speaking of puppets, this is terrible segue. It's terrible segue. But let's talk about Skinamarink.
Yes.
I wanted to like this movie. I really, really wanted to like Skinamarink. It was like right up my alley. It was dark. It was mysterious. It was like a childhood nightmare. But it dragged. Yeah. It dragged on for so long.
Well, be careful. People love that movie.
Look, if you loved it, that's great. For me, it could have been better. It did not meet my expectations. That's all.
I agree.
My thing, maybe we are desensitized as a trio in terms of what we consider horror. And the problem that I have with the film was that it was touted as incredibly horrific. I'll agree that it was incredibly liminal. I'll agree that it had jump scares. Yeah. I'll agree that it had cool visuals, especially pushing the idea that, again, granular imagery can do something very cool. But it was almost 2 hours of corner shots looking at the roof, and I'm just gonna whisper being demonic.
Oh, and Legos and toys like on the ground and stuck to the walls.
ASMR type audio just rubs me the wrong way. It makes me
maybe that's why I didn't like it, because I feel that
it gives me anxiety, but not like the good anxiety, like the horror film. Hey, I'm scared of this movie anxiety. My anxiety peaks at a 10 and I need to go relax.
It made your skin crawl because of the ASMR. No, I feel that because I'm not a big ASMR person. Like the crunching noises can get to me after a while and it just becomes like annoying and I start to like cringe.
I don't understand why people like it so much. It's wild.
Or like people chewing. No. I don't want to hear you eating. Can't do it.
Yeah. I really, really wanted to like Skinamarink. When I saw the trailer, I was so excited, and I watched it the day it came out, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what did I just watch?" The jump scares were really great, all two of them. But like,
I think we watched it the day it came out too.
Yeah, and the story was there. Like, there was stuff there. There was substance there, and I thought that the doors, like. It was definitely like very creepy. I don't know where its origin is. It was very creepypasta.
From what I understand, the director has roots in a YouTube channel that runs very parallel to creepypasta. And apparently, if I remember correctly, they take the nightmares of people and make them into films. Like someone will submit something and they'll choose to make a film to recreate it. So it's a cool premise. But 2 hours of staring at corners and obscure shots is a very long time, and I'm a fan of slow burns. Like I love slow burns, and I've had people like, I don't like this movie because it's too slow. It doesn't bug me if it builds up to something, and the problem is this didn't build to something. It built to go ahead.
The build happened at the beginning, right? Since again, spoiler alert. I feel like we're just going to spoil everything. Everything we talk about is going to be a spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah, we can't talk about
movies
without
like
spoiling.
We're going to spoil them.
But looking at it, it kind of pops off too early. I think it kind of blows its load within the first like 10 minutes of the movie.
My God,
no, yes. I'm serious. That's what it,
like. No, it does though.
No, she's definitely right.
It climaxes so fast, and then it's 2 hours of the kids not quite understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, like it climbs for the first 10 minutes and then it just plateaus for the rest of the movie.
Exactly. And that's what I felt about it. And I was just like, why did we do this? Like, I
There's-
loved the idea and the concept in the beginning of the film of like the dad being around and the kids going to bed and like all of this happening. But I could have waited a little longer for all of the doors and windows to disappear.
So, on top of that, one thing that I do appreciate about the film is that it clearly runs parallel to sleep paralysis, because what we learn at the beginning is the kid sleepwalks and he falls down the stairs
Right.
because of his sleepwalking. And while sleep paralysis and sleepwalking are different, sleep disorder is a thing. And as somebody who suffers from sleep paralysis occasionally, I can tell you that some of the sensations recreated in the film kind of feel like that.
Right.
And while, you can't recreate a sensation perfectly, I do think that it's kind of captured that sense of something off in your periphery or in the margins of your dream. My first instance of sleep paralysis, I remember feeling myself in my bed in my apartment in Alabama, and I felt somebody next to me. A lot of people say it's like, oh, the shadow man or the man with a hat or whatever, but man with a hat is more Benadryl than anything from what I understand with memes. But the premise of something being there was very much true. And I remember asking, who are you? And the presence kind of just pushing their weight on my side. It wasn't very scary. It was just like, God, this sucks to not be able to move.
Mm-hmm.
And the only examples of me lucid dreaming are during sleep paralysis, because I recognize, oh, I'm in sleep paralysis. Keep your eyes closed and start trying to move a digit. Move your toe, move your fingers, and you'll be out of it soon. And for me, that works.
There was a really interesting, now that you're talking about this, there's a really interesting sleep paralysis-ish kind of demon movie where they were a bunch of people that were under a sleep study. I think it's on Shudder. I can't remember the name of it.
The documentary?
No, it was like a horror film.
Because there is a sleep paralysis documentary called The Nightmare that is really good.
Oh, I have to watch that. No, this one, it was a bunch of people that undergo a sleep study, but then they start like messing with their dreams, and they can see a visualization on a monitor of what's happening in their dreams, and they see these like demons coming after them. But then the crossover starts happening where it's like altering their brains, and the demons start coming out of their dreams. It's a really interesting movie, and I feel like it's something that maybe we could watch at some point, but
well, I think
you'd actually like it because it has a very I Saw the TV Glow like vibe to it.
What was that series we watched with Mike? The one with Markiplier, Edge of Sleep.
The Markiplier series was.
Oh, what was it called? It was something about like not falling asleep.
Edge of Sleep, right?
Yes, and his girlfriend in that movie was a contestant on a season of America's Next Top Model.
Yeah, it's Edge of Sleep
that
on
movie
Prime.
Was really good. Or that series was really good.
And
it was a fun watch.
I think I know we're kind of getting off track of the low budget thing, and maybe we reel it back in with Skinamarink in a second, but I think Skinamarink and these other things demonstrate how tenuous of a relationship humans have with sleep. And sleep is often portrayed, I'm sorry that I'm going literary again, but Jonathan Crary has a book titled 24/7. It's, I think, Sleep and the End of Late Capitalism or something like that. It's definitely called 24/7, and it's Jonathan Crary. And he talks about how sleep is seen as kind of the last bastion of late capitalism, because capitalism has yet to really reach that plane. Like, we are free from capitalism in our dreams, which some might argue not, because subliminal marketing aims to target that next. But it's a very interesting, and I'm being very reductive, it's a full theoretical book. But I think about it and how dreams on the one hand represent a kind of freedom from our day-to-day life, and on the other, they are terrifying. For example, I have a lot of sleep disorders. I'm an insomniac. I have sleep paralysis. I used to have panic attacks when I was falling asleep because my body would be like, oh, you're not breathing as quickly. You must be dying. Anxiety disorders are fun, everybody, and just I think
every single one of us here, just to touch on this, we all have anxiety in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel you on that breathing thing though, because like if I concentrate on my breathing, I feel like I'm not getting enough air, so I'll just take like big deep inhales and stuff.
I like sleep.
I love sleep.
I do too.
I also love this conversation about dreams because I do love dreams, and this is probably, again, this is off topic, but this is probably why Nightmare on Elm Street is probably like my favorite horror franchise because of the whole dream aspect of it.
Going back to Skinamarink, though, were they awake or were they asleep?
So my interpretation, because I do think it is quite subject to interpretation, is that it's a nightmare or sleep paralysis, because we open with the kid falling down the stairs because of his sleepwalking. And why I say I feel it represents sleep paralysis is specifically that entity that is never quite present. We hear its voice in the margins, we see it vaguely, and it's replicated at the end with like a mannequin in the graininess of the film, but we never truly see what this entity is. And that to me feels very sleep paralysis. And on top of it, like at the end, I think it's like 500 plus days of having been trapped in this house. All the toys are on the ceiling and the hall extends into like infinity. I think the suggestion is the uncanniness of sleep and the horror of a nightmare. The house itself becomes the nightmare, an extension of it. And I think when we're dreaming, everything is so volatile and subject to change that, at least for me, with somebody who has such weird dreams, the landscape itself becomes a nightmare.
That, your description of just describing Skinamarink was literally the only reason why I like that movie. Which I'm sure that's probably the bigger picture of what everybody was supposed to get. I thought it was...
I liked the cartoons that they watched.
It could have been an hour shorter.
Well, I think it started as a short, actually, and then it just became a full-length film, but it didn't need to be a full-length film.
But, going back to our topic at hand, it only cost $15,000 to make. Which is pretty... I mean, honestly, I can't imagine that movie... I feel like it could have been made for less. Realistically, I don't understand where the money went for Skinamarink.
The Legos. It really was the Legos.
It was for the toys and the catering.
$14K for Legos, because Legos
and the rights
these days,
for the cartoons that they played on the TV, probably.
I think some of them might be public domain.
I was thinking that
they are old enough. It's funny though, because I remember like the cartoons that they showed in that movie on the TV were cartoons that I remember watching as a child, which made me kind of relate to the movie a little bit more. Because I mean, we've all had like that nightmare or something similar like this movie.
Well, I want to point something out about the Legos that I found on IMDb that I think is delightful. According to IMDb, in the Goofs section, despite the movie taking place in 1995, the orange Lego brick separator is shown in some shots, which was not introduced until 2011. I think it's a small fact, but I think that's funny.
That's interesting.
But what do you call that? There's a word for that. Where it's something from a time that shouldn't be there.
It's anachronistic.
Yes, that's it.
It's
Thank
out
you.
of its time, yeah. So it shouldn't be in the film technically, but I don't think we're ones to split hairs on that kind of thing, because film is already a fiction. And I think one thing that always bugs me about people like that shouldn't be in the movie. Like, well, film is also a fiction that fictionalizes the time period, so it can be in the movie. Let it go, unless it's something that realistically like ruins the film.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to do a biopic and you have something completely anachronistic, that might be a place. But I think what you're getting at with the cartoons too is that those cartoons are by their very nature liminal as well. And nostalgia is coming back in waves, and nostalgia is nothing new. But if we look at media, like look at TikTok and how it's pulling from the 90s, which is really sad that the 90s is nostalgia now. I feel so old. But
yeah. Bad. Their clothing is coming back, and it's worse than some of the horror movies we've seen.
But I bring back to these cartoons because these cartoons experimented and pushed the limits of what could be animated. And one thing, when I teach on animation and illustration as a form of literature and narrative, I point out that early cartoons, even to mid-century, were experimenting with background, foreground, character. And they were establishing what we consider the tropes today. A lot of the animations, I think, come from, it's looking like 30s, maybe 40s. I could be wrong about the dates because I'm just looking at a still from this. But having taught animation from like the 10s and 20s, you look at them and they're very unsettling because they play with landscape and body in such a way one could call it body horror. A lot of cartoons are nightmares.
The cartoons from the movie were from the 1930s.
So I think that fits very well because if you look at the 30s too, the 30s is when the Hays Code is instituted, which is it wasn't quite law, but it basically led to the establishment when it was disestablished, led to the rating system. But basically it said what could and could not be put into film or cartoons and said, like, you can't do this, you can't do that. Some of the things made sense, like maybe we shouldn't be showing children gambling and alcohol, but then there were some very problematic aspects too that reflected attitudes towards race, sexuality, and gender of the time. So it was incredibly problematic. I am by no means behind the Hays Code. We should critique it and look at the damage it did for innovation. But 30s, you're still getting cartoons pushing the limit. And again, I'll emphasize my point here. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, and I'm definitely going into academic mode.
I'm glad you're talking about it. It's
and that PhD to use.
You know,
honestly,
absolutely.
Get it.
And that may sound like a joke, y'all, but I do have my doctorate.
Yeah,
which
we should call
has
you
his
Dr.
PhD.
Mickle.
Dr. Mickle. Please don't. For the love of God, don't. Just call me Mickle.
Okay. I'll try not to call you Dr. Mickle in the future.
No. A brief aside, my family, when I got my doctorate, started calling me Dr. Mickle. They didn't use Mickle because they don't call me Mickle, but you know. Doctor on everything. Like, please stop. Please. But I bring this up because it's really cool to think of how this film relegated itself to nostalgia. And the uncanny and the liminal. And I'll point out, maybe this is something that we can do in a future episode in talking about liminality as horror itself, because like we have like the Backrooms being made into a film. We have Skinamarink. We have, I keep on coming back to liminal scenes. Like there's a scene in one of the Grudge films where a young woman is wearing a hoodie and she gets pulled into the hoodie and disappears. And it begs the question, where is she? I don't remember. If anybody wants to tell me which Grudge movie that is, you can, because I'm catching up on Grudge films. I'm pretty sure it was Grudge. Maybe it was Ring. Ring or Grudge?
It wasn't the Ring. It was Ju-on, the Grudge 2, I think.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Allison attempting to resist it. Yeah, this was the hoodie one. Yeah. It was in Chicago. Yes, okay. So do Grudge 2.
They are very different films, and I want to acknowledge that. I just haven't seen them all, so I don't have the distinguishing material, and I apologize. But my point is, liminality is something that is making a major comeback in terms of using the scene itself as horror. And maybe this comes back to the budget itself with the camera. There was a deliberately high ISO, which meant that the camera was incredibly light sensitive, which is why it's incredibly grainy. So it could pick up on the low light subject, but this was incredibly deliberate. And often high ISO is seen as something that can be negative, but it can also be a stylistic choice. And I think if there is one thing that's working well in this film, it is that granular quality.
There's something to be said about that grain. It just makes things 10 times scarier. Like if Skinamarink did not have that grain, it would have been so much more boring than it was.
Oh yeah, it needed the grain.
It needed it. It really needed it. It leaned on it. There are movies that just absolutely lean on it. And
yeah, they wanted it to be like analog horror.
I love that. I wish we had more of that, but like I feel like we're in such a time now that everything's so crisp that you have to start using old stuff, old equipment, old technology to even sort of replicate that.
I just sent Johnny a video. I had him watch it because I watch it. It's basically what happened to film that made it such that it's no longer like it used to be. And, you know, that's always going to be a complaint in media. It's a very kids these days complaint, but there was actually a premise here that they pointed out that there is a difference in technology today that omits highs and lows in cameras. And basically what ends up happening is, to get subject matter to stand out a little bit more, it actually homogenizes the whole film. So shadows and highlights are virtually, they're not gone, but those really sharp contrasts that we crave, especially in like 80s and 90s films, are gone.
Yeah.
They're gone. And part of it is the shift from analog to digital, because digital compensates much easier. And it's not to say that you can't do it with digital. Indeed, I forget which film they cited, but one film that the person presented really captured the idea that digital can do this. And we do see people doing it with digital. Skinamarink is a prime example of this. It's not analog horror. I don't think so, at least. It uses digital technology very mindfully, at least from my understanding of the film. And if I'm wrong about that, other films do at least demonstrate that digital films can pull off high contrast with deliberation.
So I am looking. We're gonna go into Paranormal Activity here in a second, but I went down a Reddit rabbit hole while we were talking. There were a couple of movies that we had missed. One is called The Battery, 2013. It was made for like something like $6,000. It's a zombie movie about boredom and loneliness in the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
It says it's a hidden gem. We should probably watch that. I've never seen it. There's another one called Found in 2012. Had an estimated budget of $8K. Very good, or very interesting. So that's something I probably want to look at. A lot of people are coming into Reddit being like, "Oh, my favorite ultra low budget was Terrifier." Terrifier was above what our goal was for this podcast. It was at 35,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
and
I mean,
then it
still
gained
a really
a lot.
Great low budget. You know, we can talk about like cult classic low budgets here at another time. But I feel like it's worth mentioning that there are other films in between, and there's also something called Bad Ben. Apparently, it is from 2016, and it was made with $300 and a cell phone.
My God.
I've skimmed over those before. I think they're on Tubi.
A lot of people are saying they're a sleeper, so it's something worth watching if other people
Good to know.
Like ultra low budget.
I do want to reiterate something kind of an in before people comment and be like, well, you're, limiting low budget. Yes, we are for this podcast, because our podcast is 45 minutes to an hour. So I just want to remind that we set an arbitrary standard of low budget under 15K. There are higher budget, low budget films, but we just want to emphasize.
We wanted to talk about no budget. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we wanted to talk shoestring budget. I'm pretty sure, like in Hollywood, like low budget is anything defined that's under $100,000, or like $100,000 and below.
So,
and I think
we wanted to go really low.
Is films that push the limit of a budget. Films that say you can make something great that costs nothing.
Right.
Yeah. And with that, I would like to discuss Paranormal Activity, because this is a mainstream movie, and the first film was only made for $15,000 and was was basically shot on like a handheld camera that was used on a tripod or set on the counter, which completely eliminated the use of a film crew, which is probably why they were able to do what they did with this movie with the money that they had, because they didn't have to hire a film crew.
I bet they had an incredible crafts and services table because of that.
That's where probably a lot of the budget went.
That kitchen that they filmed in. Come on.
I'm kidding.
No, but seriously though, going into Paranormal Activity, since we were talking about weird liminal space, sort of crazy dream, that movie has like a very crazy like dream element to it that makes it interesting. Because all of the stuff in the first one, doesn't it all happen when they're in bed?
Most of it happens when they're asleep. And
she starts like sleepwalking and has visions, and well, not visions, but like, weird things start happening around the house.
I think
they put the powder on the floor and they see the footprints.
I think the important thing about this film too is that it runs with the trope that we do see in other horror films, but gets explored more recently. The idea that people are haunted rather than houses, that she is marked. Yeah. And that I think it runs within her family too. That, and, like
it does.
That we'll have to inevitably talk about is Noroi. Not today, but Noroi, also known as The Curse. It's about... It's
really good.
You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, it's incredible.
We
We'll
should
watch
watch
it together.
that. We'll watch that.
Okay.
Um,
All right, I'm
it's
looking it up. For those who haven't seen it, it is a 2005 Japanese horror film
and it's
about a journalist
incredible.
pursuing supernatural phenomenon that is missing in reality. Ooh. Yeah, we're gonna have to
It's
watch this.
very incredible. But it's found footage. I don't know the budget. And why did I bring it up? Oh, because the idea of like a familial or patterned curse. I mean, we also watched Incantation together, didn't we?
The Thai film?
Yeah, it's Taiwanese.
Is it Thai?
It's Taiwanese.
I haven't seen
Taiwanese.
that one either.
That's on Netflix. That's also a really good film. I'd watch that again.
Yes.
So people are haunted, not houses,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool. I think that's actually a little bit more fascinating. And in my brain, people being haunted makes more sense than a doll being haunted, or a clock, or a house. Because like, if
or
I used to do-
Deathbed, the
I
bed
used to do
that
paranormal
eats.
investigations. Just a little bit about my backstory, my history. That's a whole
Your
nother
your
episode
lore,
for
so to
another-
speak.
My lore. That's another episode for another time. But in my opinion, I think that people are more haunted than items, because like as a ghost, like you put yourself in the ghost's not shoes for a second, right? If you were a ghost, right? Just like hypothetically, would you want to stay in the same place for fucking ever? No. You would
Well,
want to
if it
attach
were
yourself to
Chili's and I
something
could get
interesting.
margaritas.
And people are interesting. Humans are interesting. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I would a bar would be hilarious. But I digress. Like I would want to be attached to a person, not an object or an item. Like I've been watching Ghosts. I don't know if you've seen that series. It's really cute. It's based off of
Have
a
not.
UK series, and they changed it for American audiences, and it's actually really cute and super well done. But there's one. All of the ghosts are strapped to the house except for one. One of their ghost powers is that he can leave the property, and he has so much more fun than all the rest of the ghosts because he can leave the property and go do stuff. And then there's like another ghost in the series that's like haunting a car, so they have to like go wherever the car goes. But if the car ends up at like a, I don't know, a chop shop or whatever, then they're fucked. So like at the end of the day, I feel like it would be more reasonable to believe that a ghost would be more interested in being tied to someone rather than something.
Right. Well, it calls to
also
mind the.
It's also like more terrifying that it's tied to someone, because like you see like, oh, that like in Poltergeist, like, oh, like I mean the house gets swallowed up into oblivion and stuff, but like they leave the house. But as seen in like the subsequent the films that come after that, it's not the house that is haunted, but whatever spirit is attached to their daughter.
Yeah, and then they reject her in the third movie and make her move out.
Yeah, and yeah, they basically send her to live with her aunt and uncle. But
We're not dealing with this
that's
shit
more
anymore.
horrifying because it makes it seem like there's really no escape.
Right.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah,
I think a later Paranormal Activity film does tackle this idea that like other aspects of the family go back further to being cursed. I forget which one it is, but I think it's the fourth one. I haven't kept up with the series.
There's like a prequel one, isn't there? Where
there's like 7 now.
There's a
also,
lot.
I think the third and fourth films were actually directed by the guys who produced the TV show Catfish. I'm not even joking. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Neve from Catfish. It's his brother and whatever the other guy's name is. I don't remember his name, but I'm pretty sure they're both producers on the show Catfish. They directed the third and fourth Paranormal Activity movies.
I am going to point out too, though, this idea of haunting. I mean, it's something. I think horror really taps into the psyche very well in exploring and externalizing trauma. And like not to make a joke of it, but I think of like Jamie Lee Curtis. It's all about trauma. And the idea that film is about trauma, it's true in many ways that a lot of film, to be haunted is to experience a form of trauma. And haunting is, by its very nature, what trauma does. I think specifically of the James Joyce story at the end of Dubliners, and specifically the idea of being haunted. I'm pretty sure it's called Ghost. What is Last story in Dubliners. It's sad because James Joyce. It's the dead. It's not ghosts. Ghost is. I'm thinking Henry Gibson, who James Joyce was obsessed with. But if you're not familiar with James Joyce, Irish author from the turn of the 20th century, wrote particularly about Dublin, and the dead. Literally, there's no true ghost, and it's not like a horror story. But basically, what ends up is that Gabriel and his wife are at a party that is for the new year, for the holidays, and they are toasting basically those who are with us, those who have passed, and his wife starts acting aloof, and they get home, and because of a song that she heard that night, she remembers her first lover, Michael Fury, who passed away. And the whole idea of the dead coming back in the form of memory reflects that idea of loss, grieving, tragedy, and trauma that attaches itself to a person indelibly, which is all a fun and fancy way of saying that this horror kind of reflects, again, human nature. Perhaps that's why we are so fascinated with the idea of somebody being marked, because in many ways, and I say this as somebody who deals with mental health struggles persistently, they surface unintentionally and in surprising ways.
Going back to Paranormal Activity, I think it's interesting to see how that movie was really ahead of its time.
For what it was, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I actually think it was edited on like Final Cut Pro.
Seriously?
To give you an idea. I'm pretty sure it was either Final Cut Pro or what was the name of it? What was the other editing software that was popular around that time?
I think but definitely introduced new ideas of what can be scary. And it made you, it really makes you think like, hey, what if that happened to me? You know what I mean? Like, an object you can throw away. A person, not so much. You know what I mean?
I mean, you can.
Bye. Love you guys. See you later. Bye.
I mean, that's what they did with the daughter in the third Poltergeist movie. They said, go with your aunt and uncle.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting because that's like a person, you know?
Right.
It's not, I think it really did introduce a whole new way of looking at spirits and specters. And I mean, the Poltergeist kind of had a lot to say about that as well. But you kind of didn't quite know that until later down the line.
Talking about budget, just as a kind of aside, fun fact about Poltergeist, that scene where she's in the pool with the skeletons, those skele people are real corpses.
Yeah.
What?
I think that's a well-known fact. There's also the whole curse around those movies, but we'll save that for another day.
I just want to know the logic in where the skeletons came. Like, who was like, hey, let's just use these real skeletons?
And I don't even think they told the actor that they were real
until after.
She didn't find out till like after the fact.
Oh my gosh!
It's called verisimilitude.
And then, and like that same thing happened in like, I know we're off topic, but that same type of thing happened in the first Alien movie when the alien bursts out of the guy's stomach. They didn't tell anybody in the cast that was going to happen because Ridley Scott wanted to get a genuine horrifying reaction from the cast, so he didn't that was going to happen.
It's an incredibly powerful way to get your cast to react genuinely. I think specifically of, I think his name's Marshall. It's Marshall and Lily in How I Met Your Mother, right? That's the couple's name. It's Allison Hannigan and Person McPherson, whose name escapes me right now.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure his name is Marshall. There's the episode where his father passes, and he didn't know out of character. So his reaction is very genuine. And as much as I don't like that show, it's just another example of utilizing a kind of reverse dramatic irony where rather than the characters knowing something, or rather than the reader or viewer knowing something that the characters don't, the actual actor doesn't know. And it is a way of evoking a more emotive quality. And maybe it is a provocative way of doing so because in some ways we have the reversal of that in Poltergeist. But coming back to this, if we come back to Paranormal Activity, it demonstrated something very important. The idea that a low budget could push the limits of Hollywood. Right. Importantly, Paranormal Activity is an example of a massive commercial success on a shoestring budget. And certainly, later ones got more budget, and thus I hate calling it higher quality, because bad quality is still good quality in my opinion, especially if you're doing with it deliberately. Like found footage, Blair Witch Project, immense commercial success, immense folkloric extensive practice.
Well, the marketing around that movie kind of pushed for that too.
Right. But it was purely rogue. And, there are some ethical questions of it because, it made people really concerned that people were dead.
Right.
There's a whole ethical question about the marketing, but maybe that's an aside. But it also pushed the boundaries of what low budget could do. One could argue that Blair Witch Project is not a quality movie in the way it is filmed. I don't agree with that. I'm just stating that, it's lo-fi, but there's a place for low fidelity. Low fidelity is an art form.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why else is lo-fi hip-hop girl sitting there studying for as many years as she's been doing, listening to, and she still hasn't taken that damn test. Don't know how well she's studying.
So that being said, I think we can kind of round out our ultra low budget, no budget, shoestring budget podcast for today. We did kind of get a little off topic, but honestly, talking about everything individually, kind of based off of what it was, is I think important. Because it sort of shows that you don't need a lot of money to make cool shit. And I think that every artist can take that as like a thing anyway, because art is expensive.
I'm looking up a quote right now.
Art is also subjective. Like, there will be people that won't like it, but you may have a small niche group of people that will absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, importantly, too, I think a lot of people get hung up on cost. A lot of people get hung up on the idea that I have to have this fancy equipment. If I buy this thing, I will be good at it. And like I remember when I did, I used to DJ in my spare time. I wasn't great at it. I will say that. I occasionally make electronic music, and it's fun. But I remember a lot of people being like, oh, you need this equipment or you need this. And I was like taking a field recorder and recording the sound of breaking glass, of screwdrivers, and using techniques to take what I had at my disposal and make into music or make into a set. And I think what the low budget emphasizes is that things can be done with what you have. And I will, conclude what I'm saying with a quote from the Comte de Lautremont, a poet from the 19th century. Poetry should be made by all, not by one. And I think he isn't really talking about low budget horror films. At least I don't think he is. He's not. But he's very much not. But still, I think
he's definitely a pain in the ass. Okay.
Yeah. The next thing it says, poetry should be made by all, not by one, except for the person who made Skinamarink. Don't at me. I'm just kidding. They should still make things. Like I said, make bad art. Is that a hot take? I apologize. I don't apologize.
Replace the Skinamarink with Outwaters, which will bring us to another episode, which will be found footage.
Importantly, too, as Johnny said, everybody has different tastes. We may not like Skinamarink. You might, and that's fine. Like, we're not here to tell you that as a good or bad film, we didn't like it, and that's fine. You don't even have to like the things that we like. Wow, people should have their own subjective opinions.
To be fair, we do watch a lot of trash.
We
watch a lot of bad movies.
Neon Demon. And a lot
which is trash.
I love Neon Demon.
I will defend that one to the death.
I'll defend that one to the death.
I will defend that one to Elle Fanning's death.
Oh.
That being said, I just think, if you're out there and you're thinking, hey, I need $1 million budget, no, make something with $10, make something with $20, give yourself maybe $100. You have nothing, you have a camera, make something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the cool thing about art, that, you made something bad, you still made something that didn't exist. JWoww made a terrible film. She still tried. I give her that. I did not like her film. She tried to make something, and that's something very different than what she did. She's not a director, but she is for this film, and I give her that. As much as the movie wasn't great, I admire her for making something.
She directed, wrote the story, and produced the film. So she did a lot. She did everything for that film.
But I'll point out, too, you can't always expect to have a home run the first time if you've never played baseball before.
Right.
And that's okay, too. A lot of people, say, like, I can't do it. And one thing that has been encouraging to me is changing the mindset from actually a composition article I read recently about writing. Changing the attitude from I can't to I can't just yet.
Oh.
I know. I thought that was very important, and it helped me kind of shift my own perception of art. You might think, like, I can't make the next Lord of the Rings, or I can't make the next Bad Taste.
What? You went backwards
I think
in
that's-
time.
I think that's
I
also
went
a little
backwards in
bit-
time, but forward in quality.
Those were made by the same person.
That's my point, though.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Someone might want to be out there. Someone might be out there and think, like, they want to make the next Lord of the Rings, make the next epic film, or
Yeah.
maybe they want to make a deliberately trash film, and they say, I don't have the ability. You do.
I mean, exactly like Peter Jackson right there. He made Bad Taste, and for like we watched that recently, and he went on to make Lord of the Rings.
Right. And I think, the three of us make art.
Mhm.
And we all had to start somewhere. I remember the first time I made
art.
we
Oh.
we all understand the value of making things that fall apart, that don't meet our expectations. And I'm just trying to, tie this back to the idea that low budget doesn't inherently mean that it's going to be crap. That doesn't mean that it's going to be good either. Some of these films are considered more seminal than others, and then others had higher budgets and did not so great. But I would just encourage you, if you're out there and you're wanting to make something, just do it. Do it for yourself.
Do it.
Do
And
it
with
for
that,
yourself.
I think that is a great ending to this episode of Features of the Night. Thank you all so much for joining me.
And don't let the ghost spite or do. I don't know. We don't kink shame.
What?
I don't.
Talking about.
Like the bed bugs or ghosts. I don't know.
Oh, don't let the bed bug.
Yeah, don't let the
I
ghost
got
smite.
I would
going
have
back
said
to our
don't
earlier
let the
point.
ghosts attach themselves to you.
Well, how do you think they attack, or how do you think they attach? They bite you. They're like lampreys.
Oh my gosh, no.
Oh,
Now
God.
we have new things to fear.
Ugh.
Thank you all for joining us on this episode of Features of the Night. I hope to see you on the next one. Please don't forget to subscribe. We are also on Spotify. You can subscribe there. We are fully syndicated now, so you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Audible. You can find us anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. Wow. We're all grown up, guys.
Wow, we did it.
We
made
did
it.
Did it! Thank you again for joining us. I will see you. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.